Hi, welcome to our Training Them Wisely podcast. This is Rebecca Messer, your co-host with our host Renee Christensen, and we are so excited to be sharing with you guys today on one of our number one most asked questions, scenarios, situations, and it kind of doesn't need to grab me or any kind of other cliffhangers because
if you have kids, you want to know.
you want to know. And this is on the topic of sibling conflict.
Yes.
So if you ever think that, sibling conflict might apply sometimes to your kids.
If you have more than one child, there you go.
Today's going to be a good day for you. And if it's an only child and they play with other children, like
that's true.
This one we get this question a lot. So we're excited to have you guys with us today. Please like, share, follow us on any of the social media platforms, as well as you can find our products on trainingthemwisely.com. That'll take you to either Etsy or Amazon. But we're excited for you guys to join in today. Sibling conflict.
Gotta love it.
I'm the oldest of six. I can say that we were just perfect in every way. Not.
I have 7 children. They're not perfect.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So I was the oldest of 6. I've got 2 of my own now. And even when I just had one and they were learning how to play, he was learning how to play with others. It was, you see the little sinners in them.
You do. And if there's something that can quickly become kind of irksome to a mom, it's because what do we want as moms? Honestly, we want love. We want unity. We want peace. We want joy. We want laughter. We want all of the fun stuff. And we don't want conflict. And I
think it hit me differently when I did become a mom, because I thought about how much God wants us to get along.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would see my kids not getting along, it hurt.
It does.
And it was very upsetting. And I thought, and it hit me like, oh my goodness, how much more does God want us to get along?
Yeah.
As the body of Christ. And so we're excited to share with you guys today just some principles that apply across the board, no matter what age your kids are, whether they're babies, preschool, and you've had your first and you're just bringing your second home, or your kids are school age. And
just realize it's a really common problem. This is something that literally every day we get a question about, at least one, and that it's normal for kids to fight, but because there's sin in the world, but there are principles that we can apply to it to try to decrease it. I am not saying that my children do not ever fight. There have been a couple of days where all of my children have gotten along for the entire day, and it's definitely, and I've called people to let them know. There was not a single fight in my house the entire day. So it's definitely the exception. And a lot of times they make up for it the next day. So
one of the first things that we've talked about this in a lot of things, but as you're discipling your kids, specifically in regards to sibling conflict, the attitude in which the parent is approaching it. And so the first thing that we just kind of thought of when we were talking about it was praying.
Yes.
The praying consistently for growth in their relationship towards each other.
Yes.
And growth in harmony that is experienced between them, because the Lord is going to be able to work things in their heart that are going to transcend even what we can work on behaviorally as a parent. And so I think we really have to start with prayer.
100%. And that is something that I pray every single day for my family. Specifically, I pray that we would be a loving family, biblical love in action. And there is not a day that goes by for years that has not been my prayer. So that is one way that we can be proactive. And we just want to talk a little bit about being proactive in sibling conflict, so that we're not just being reactive to a problem that's already there. And so there are ways that we can be proactive. We know our children. We know when they're struggling. We know when they're tired, when they're hungry. We
can see the buildup coming.
Yes. I know whenever there's a special food that there's a limited amount of, and that I am aware that whenever there's a large family and that
Gideon just told James y'all are going to love this story. Gideon told James the other day that, there was a piece of dessert or chocolate or something. And James goes, "Oh, I'll cut it. And Gideon goes, "Okay, but Priscilla gets to choose first." The look on James' face, like, "Oh," and he goes, "Okay, mommy can cut it." Just got so tickled because I was like, it's already there like that.
And that works great for 2 kids. And that's what my mom always did. And so we were so careful to do it in half. But if you have 7 kids, it doesn't work as easily.
Nope. My papa talks about when he was one of 5 siblings, and they didn't have a lot growing up. And so he would talk about he learned to cut the cake where he would cut it bigger on top, and then he would get narrower so it looked like for his siblings that it was bigger on top. So you guys, this stuff happens. You
It
don't have to
does.
teach sibling conflict.
You don't have to teach motives to not be the right motives or anything
No,
like
it
that.
just happens. So
But we
this,
can be proactive in it. We
yeah,
can be aware of it. We can be listening really well. This is something that Rebecca does an amazing job of. She is so in tune with what is going on with her children in the background. As soon as there is an issue, she is like right on it that there is something going on. So just being proactive in that way, because a lot of times if you can nip it really quickly before it gets,
nip it in the bud.
yeah, before it gets to where it's expanded and becoming worse. So just think about those types of ways that we can be proactive and talking about it whenever there is a consistent problem when
Yeah.
they're not upset, so that nobody does well when the emotions are high. But if you have set their expectations of what there is to expect beforehand, it really helps. We, for me, one area that my children can be difficult in is getting into a vehicle whenever we stopped having the 15 passenger van and there's some prized seats. And so just discussing before we get into the van that they're either assigning seats, this is where you will sit if it's on a long trip, or let's remember that we care and love for each other. There will be no raised voices. There will be no fighting whenever you're getting into the van, just to remind them as they're getting into it.
What your
What
expectations
my
are.
expectation is, so that there is not this,
Shock and
because what would
tension.
happen is everybody runs down to the garage to get into the van, and then I'm right behind them. And by the time I get in, it's, no, he's in my seat. No, I got that last time.
Mhm.
I'm sure y'all have never heard that.
No, probably never. And I think about like one of the things that I try to do with mine is when we're praying, like when I'm praying with them, I try to talk through the attitudes that I expect them to have towards their siblings. So we talk about being kind
Mhm.
and gentle-hearted towards one another. And, we're kind to our sister, we're
Mhm.
kind to our brother.
Yeah.
We share our toys with them. And I work from home. And so if a skerfuffle starts, like I've got to end it quickly because I can't afford the bigger like explosion tornado. I mean, one of mine has learned how to stamp their foot at the other one when they are particularly irritated. And, we have a conversation about like we get to use our words. We don't react.
Yeah.
We process through things. And so I think it's important to, when you're thinking about being proactive and not reactive, is you have to have your heads right
Yeah.
and not let
You have to be not reactive as well.
you be triggered
Mhm.
by whatever behavior that they have going on, which can be hard.
It can be. And I love what you said, because a lot of those words really have to do with love. But coming back to the you not being triggered, Kendra, who's been on our podcast before, she's a children's minister. And one thing that she said is that I always want to be the calmest person in the room. And that stuck with me so well, because as the parent, we need to be the calmest person in the room. And that really does help with sibling conflict whenever voices are raising. When
The
I lost,
escalation starts.
yeah, when I lost my voice, whenever you get sick and you lose your voice, my entire house is quieter, because I would have to whisper correction to them whenever they started, and they would have, their voices naturally went down. So just having a
soft
quiet voice.
answer turns away wrath, like the Bible. Shocking.
The Bible is full of truth. So whenever you're looking at this, love is really important. I mean,
Yeah.
love is the problem with sibling conflict. I have never, cannot think of a single time that I have encountered a sibling conflict where it was not because there was an issue from 1 Corinthians 13, which describes love, that was not followed. So for years, we had 1 Corinthians 13, not painted, but some sticker thing that was on the wall. And
pencil things.
yeah, and so what my children did is every time that there was an argument of some sort, we would go over and we would find where in 1 Corinthians 13 we had failed in love, because it showed them.
It's a really good litmus test.
It is, and it showed them where the failure was, and also it can show what to replace it with. I was irritable, or I was not patient. So the solution is to be patient. And so if you know those things, that way you're looking at the truth, because the Bible is the truth. Because love is defined the actions in love are defined in that chapter. And so just, I think
Really
that
clearly.
yeah, having that up, that is actually something that we're going to be having coming out soon on our Etsy shop. We're recording this in advance. It might be ready by the time that we're posting this, but First Corinthians 13 is very, if you can do something, put that up somewhere so that you can refer your kids to it. It's a great thing to do. And I want to read John 13:34 to you. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. So that is a command that Jesus has given to us. We are to love others.
Yeah.
When we're loving others, we're not having that conflict and that division. So it is something that's very important that we want to model for our children
Yeah.
and to encourage in our children. Now, I am not going to say that your children will ever be able to be perfect without conflict, because they're human, just like we
Yeah.
are not perfect towards
I mean,
each
ask yourself,
other.
is there anybody as an adult that you don't get along with? Your spouse, somebody at church,
Yeah.
friend, coworker.
Yeah. Or ever. Yeah,
Conflict
it
exists.
does.
And so I think love has to be our primary motive. And when it's not done the way that it should be, lovingly, forgiveness
Forgiveness.
is
Yep.
a very important principle and practice to, as a parent, practice forgiveness,
Yeah.
but also to teach our kids that it's important that they forgive one another,
Mhm.
whether or not the other person is sorry.
Yes. And
Because,
yeah, and to forgive them, because yes, sorry, go ahead. I was
no,
just
you're
thinking
fine.
my constant one that I'm getting from one of my children right now is, but he did such and such to me. My answer is, and so they did something back to them. And my answer is always, where in the Bible, find a verse in the Bible that says, if he took my toy, if he hit me, I hit him back. It's not there.
Well, right. And
So
my answer in that situation with like, well, but he did this. Yes, he did. And that's why it's important that you forgive him.
yes,
Like
exactly.
that's
There
the
you
thing.
go.
Yes, there was an offense. You're correct. And so the proper response for you is you can't control the other person's behavior.
So you control your
And
sin.
that's a big thing that in society in general is people needing to take, and my mom was so big on this, taking personal responsibility
Responsibility.
for your piece of the pie.
Yep.
And so the piece of the pie for the offended party is
To forgive.
forgiveness. And
Yes.
so one that my
To
mom,
watch the response.
I think a lot of moms actually have done this one, is Ephesians 4:32. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you.
Mhm.
Because you're teaching them that it's not just a forgiveness that they're stemming from themselves.
Yes.
This is forgiveness that God gave to you because of Jesus and the
Mhm.
sacrifice that he made.
Yes.
And so it's important that we're doing the same thing, because there's plenty. I mean, we could get into a whole episode on forgiveness
Mhm.
that I'm sure we will at some point. But that principle of he's going to forgive us as we forgive others. And it starts when the kids are even very little. I remember my 18-month-old did not want to say sorry one time. And it was a 3.5 hour battle for
Wow.
this child to say sorry. And most people would say that an 18-month-old isn't going to remember what is happening 3.5 hours later. Oh, they remembered very clearly, and sorry was eventually said, and we talked about forgiveness. And so, I want to encourage you, no matter how little they are, teaching the principles of love
Mhm.
and forgiveness and that tenderheartedness to each other, it really sets the foundation. And then if you're like, well, my teenagers, like, we're so far past that now, there's no time like the present to start.
There isn't. Yeah, exactly. And they do, I mean, teenagers, they are a different breed with the hormones and everything that can be going on. Um, Mine have been pretty easy, honestly, if I think about it, but they do have their days where
And
they're a
there's
little
and
different with the
you know, we'll
hormones.
we'll talk through as we get a little bit further into this about the comparison with how God has wired them.
Yes.
But one thing that's very important, especially for the older kids, is hearing the whole matter out.
Yes.
Because sometimes one's going to come to you with one version of the story, but it may not be the full picture. And then the other one, and there's his side, there's that saying of there's
Mhm.
this version, and then there's the truth. you've got to hear the whole thing before you just rush to a disciplinary action
Mhm.
or a correction, because you've got to have the full picture.
Exactly. And so Proverbs 18:13, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. So do make sure that you're listening to the whole side of the story. Or if it happens outside and you're at my house, there's cameras. So
Because
I'm like, you might as well tell the truth because we know what
we have to be a
look, I can see
wise
it.
parent.
We
We
do.
can't just, I
Yep.
mean, it literally says that it'll be a shame and a folly. And it's, it's, you're going to have forgiving and for apologizing and things to
You
do for
can.
the child that you've wronged if you don't.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many details they can remember whenever you remind them they have a camera all of a sudden.
They will remember.
So yeah, just be sure that you are listening though to everybody, because the one thing that you do not want to do as a parent, and you will, I know I have, you do not want to assume that the first report that you get is correct and in some way correct discipline, talk to someone without hearing the entire story and then finding out that there was a lot more to the story, or that the offense was exaggerated in some way by somebody that
Yeah.
was angry about it and have therefore overreacted
I had a
to
sibling who
that.
loved to exaggerate what went down, and it was really spicy sometimes. So it's very important to hear all the things and make sure that as a parent, I mean, our goal is to be as Christ-like as possible in our
Yeah.
parenting. And so he is a fair and just judge.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, we do function in a judge kind of capacity with our children
We
as we're
do.
hearing out the whole matter. So
So to
that's our
listen.
encouragement, to just listen and don't be rash.
And the other thing, the next thing we want to talk to you about is that yes, there will be conflict. We do not want to minimize that, because I think that sometimes we can go too far where I know that I've seen some things online where people have talked about how there is no conflict among their children, which is amazing. And I'm that good.
Kudos to
That would be
them.
awesome. And I
If
mean,
that's the truth.
yeah. And I wish, I would love to say that that's true about my family. It's not. Not gonna lie about that one. So like I said, I've called on the days that like,
You get along.
um, so when while you're not expecting conflict
You don't
and
go
you
looking
don't
for
go
it.
looking for it, but you want to also be aware it can happen. But what I really try to do is to encourage my children to get along and encourage unity. And that is something that I look for and expect them to do. That is
Yeah.
my expectation. My expectation is that there is not fighting, there is not name calling, there is sharing, there is loving, that we are following First
Yeah.
Corinthians 13.
We don't want to go looking for trouble.
We don't, but and when I see them doing these things, I want to encourage them.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to encourage one another. And whenever I see someone stepping out that has been struggling with patience or sharing or whatever it might be, my one of my sons, sharing has not been an issue for my children in general because they get really excited about younger siblings. And for whatever reason, that particular type of conflict isn't one that has come in, except for with one of my children. And that particular child really struggled to share for a long time. And so we talked about it whenever he was not emotional over and over and over. And finally, one night he came to me and he said that he wanted to give away his nicest toys to someone that would not have toys. And I was like, oh, all of these conversations finally paying off. And he had been getting better and better with his own siblings in that
That's
area as
awesome.
well. But there was a lot of talk that had been, but I'd been encouraging that
Yeah.
every time that I'd seen something like that until it finally seems to have broken.
Because you want to feed and fertilize the fruit that you want to see out of your
You do,
kids.
exactly.
And so I personally really do not think it's funny to mock or be like, oh, well, they're just siblings, so of course they're gonna fight like cats and dogs, or oh, they're this, that. I don't think it's funny to encourage or look for that kind of behavior, because that's not the behavior that we want to see more out of
Yeah,
from
it's
them.
not. It's not.
Which,
We don't want to get in either ditch. We don't want to get in a ditch of perfectionism where we
right.
overreact to sin when children will sin. And we also do not want to get into that.
Of course
Of
they
course they're
do.
going to. Who cares? Let them work it out on their own and kind of step back and not be
Right.
involved.
We have to actively disciple.
Yeah.
And so one of the verses is from 1 Corinthians 1:10, and it's when Paul is talking about divisions in the church.
Yeah.
Because there's still a few of those that might exist today.
And really, if we are believers in our family, we are the
Mhm.
church, those of us that are. So we need to act
Yep.
like the church.
And so Paul was just saying that he was appealing to them by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree, all of you agree, that there be no divisions among you, but that you be united in the same mind and the same judgment. Now that can kind of sound like Mission Impossible, but
It is the expectation.
that is the expectation, and that is what the Lord would have for all of us, and especially as the family of God, but even these family units, like
Yeah.
this is what we're striving towards, is that we can be united, and we're going to have different opinions. We're going to have
Mhm.
different ways of looking at things because God has given everybody different personalities, spiritual gifts, strengths, weaknesses, but it is possible to approach things from kind of the same foundational attitude
Yeah.
through Jesus.
Through
Like
Jesus,
it,
because we have the same definition of
yeah.
love, the same definition of what should be happening, the same definition of right and wrong, because it's based on the Bible. And so another thing that we feel like can really help with sibling conflict can actually be as parents.
Mm-hmm.
We can foster attitudes of conflict if we are comparing our children. And this could be a kind of a simple thing that we're trying to do to encourage them, but we're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Why can't you keep your room as clean as this? Or, oh, they're able to do this.
See
Can
how
you
so and
copy
so?
this? Like we could even say it positively.
Yeah.
Like it could be oh, they do this really well, copy. But still, if we need to be careful in how we are treating our children, that we're not comparing strengths and weaknesses because every single child is different.
Yeah.
God gave them different gifts. They have different weaknesses. And we don't want to foster any conflict among our children. And
No.
so a verse from that is a brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city, and quarreling is like the bars of a castle. So we do not want to cause offense. We don't want to allow conflict to get so out of hand that there is so much offense that there is not yielding. That it is like a castle where they can't. I mean, I think
Because
about my
kids will
children.
often interpret this, when I think about it, they interpret this as favoritism. And, a very clear
True.
example from this in the Bible is with
Joseph.
Joseph
Mhm.
and his brothers. And, parents are going to like certain things about different children or be drawn to certain things. But I watched and can honestly say my mom loved all of us
Mhm.
equally. There were different dynamics to each of the relationships, but she loves equally. And
Yeah.
I've been able to strive with that with my kids because a lot of the conflict that came with Joseph and his siblings was the favoritism and the comparison. And,
Mhm.
they literally were mocking the
Yeah.
fact that this was going on. And that's just not something that we want to be named of a
At
home
all.
that is claiming to be
No,
Christian
and
because,
you want it to be forever. The thing is that these siblings are siblings for life,
yeah,
and we want them to grow up to be friends.
yeah.
We want them to grow up to get along. And so this is something that we, with friendship, with relationships, have fun as a family. Get in there, be laughing, be enjoying each other. Try to have as many positive family relationships as you can with those siblings involved. Let them.
Because those relationships are going to outlive the ones we have with our kids, and
Exactly.
they're
And
going
so
to
they're
need
so
each other.
important. Yeah. Like today, my children desperately wanted to go pick apples and go work on the farm because it was beautiful weather instead of after we'd done school in the morning, instead of doing more school in the afternoon. And I said, you know what? Sure. We went
To
on
the
over to the
outdoors we
farm
go.
and they were able to laugh and play together and I mean, these are memories that they're making together.
Yeah.
Positive interactions, and they matter. They add up because we want our children to be friends with each other.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, as we're wrapping this up, we just want to encourage you, like, you want to foster those friendships among them because it's gonna pay off, not just here on earth, but it's gonna pay off eternally. And David had written in Psalm 133, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. And think about, when my home is peaceful and my kids are getting along, it brings so much
Joy,
delight
peace,
to
delight.
my
Yes.
heart. It brings so much delight. Like it's an atmosphere in our home that is sweet.
Mhm.
And I think if we circle back at the beginning, it starts with us praying. It
Yes.
starts with us fostering these and encouraging these friendships and going into it not with this hopeless, oh well, it's doomed like the world wants to
Yes.
tell you, but it's we have to,
And not on the other side of too much where you think it
yeah.
has to be perfect and therefore you feel
But we have to
despair. Yeah.
fight and stand in the gap. That is
Mhm.
one of the ways in which we're discipling. And so
Yes.
I hope this is really just encouraging to you guys and that you
Mhm.
find a new tip, and you may not be able to do all of it at once. Please feel free to save this one,
Yeah.
re-reference it, listen to it, and make progress as you're working through. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You guys do, but if you do have a specific question based on what we've shared, we'd love to continue to help you because we love for kids to be getting along and the
Yes.
harmony in homes. And you can find us on any of, again, your favorite podcast providers, as well as YouTube. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. Um, you can find our products from the trainingthemwisely.com, and it'll take you to Etsy or Amazon where you can find things. And we're just so excited to be able to continue to share resources with you guys
Yes.
that help you in discipling your family, because loving, authentic discipleship matters. Hope you guys have a great week.
Have a great week.
Bye.